Thank you. Okay. So now we go to this thing from the Book of Shabbos that's no longer in print. So it has a nice introduction. So Torah tells us on the seventh day, Shabbos to your God, you may not do any malacha. So what is a malacha? Malacha is it's more than work. So it means doing a prohibited activity, one of the 39 categories that are prohibited on Shabbos. And let's see what the 39 categories are, the next page. So on the next two pages, which reads over here 41 and 42, we have the 39 categories, and they come into groups. The first 11 are the preparation of dyes. There were curtains in the Mishkan as a covering, also as a paroches, a separation between the holy and holy of holies. Also to the entrance of the Mishkan, there was a curtain made of different colored material. And preparation of the dyes are the same steps that it takes to bake bread. So in the Mishnah, when it describes the first 11 categories, the Mishnah uses the activities that are used for making of bread. But actually in the Mishkan, it was used to make herbs, and the same process was also done to do the preparation and dyeing. Then you have the next 12 are preparation of wool materials that was used in the curtains. Then there was also skins that were placed on top of the Mishkan as a covering, as a roof. So there you have the next from 25 to 31. Then markings and connection of the beams were 32 and 33. Erecting the Mishkan, actually doing the building, was 34 and 35. Then welding is 36 and 37. And then completion is Makav Patish. The 39th one is carrying. So here we have, if you look through the 39 categories, and we'll be going through each one individually. Next page. You have the Tolada. So when we're speaking about the 39 categories, these are the principle of how it was actually done in the Mishkan. However, each one also has an offspring, which is also a Torah prohibition. But since if we were to list every single thing, we would have lists and lists. Actually, Rish Lakish tells us that for each malacha, for each category, there's another 39 subcategories where it is accomplishing the same thing or similar to. So let's see what would also be a Torah prohibition that accomplishes the same result as the Av. And the example that's given here is Charisha, which is the first of the 39 categories, and that is preparing the ground for planting. Charisha actually means plowing. Plowing is digging up the earth, making it soft, making it loose. So when you put a seed in, then it's going to take. If you were to put the seed on top of a compacted earth, usually it would not grow. So here you have to prepare the ground by loosening the ground. So that is charisha, that is plowing. And anything that is involved in preparing the ground for planting goes into the same category. And that would include, give me some examples. How would we prepare the ground before we're going to plant? Some examples are given here. Over here, the example is removing weeds. So since you want whatever you're going to plant to be weed-free, so before you're going to plant, you're going to remove all the weeds. What would be another example of how you prepare the ground for planting, in addition to loosening the earth? What else is there? Watering. What else? Okay, if there's hills and all kind of rocks and things, you would straighten out the hills, remove all the rocks, take away all the debris. The same would also be preparing the ground, would also be those who use fertilizer, organic fertilizer. So you would prepare it before you're going to plant. So all of these things are included. If you do this on Shabbos, even though it's not specifically planting, it's not charisha, which is plowing, but anything, what plowing means preparing the ground for planting. Anything that is involved in that is a Torah prohibition.
What if you have a dog and you take your dog, I guess, for a walk?
Yes, and
then
so,
you can't really pick up after
right,
the
so-
dog because then you're carrying.
so
but then
again, we're going to go,
fertilizing.
so since that's not your intention,
Okay.
it would be different than bringing in a herd of sheep.
Okay,
That's the difference.
okay,
So there it would be actually a malacha because that's your intention.
okay.
Now, the next example that is given, that we also have a second illustration in the same paragraph, is zriya, which is actually putting the seed in the ground. What is our purpose? We want it to grow. Anything that's going to help the growing is included in this malacha. Example that's given is watering. Here again, why are you watering it? In order for it to grow. So therefore, watering a plant on Shabbos is the malacha of planting. Goes into that category. So this is what other examples are there when we are when we're to promoting growth. Anything that promotes growth would go into this category. What promotes growth? So we have, after it's already planted, again, fertilizing would be a part of it. Weeding would be a part of it. After it's already growing, take away all of the weeds that are growing nearby. So this would also be included in this malacha. So this type of tolda, this type of secondary or an offspring, tolda means an offspring, a child of. So the principal malacha is called an av, it's called a parent, and anything else that is an offspring that is in this same category is called its offspring, its child. So now we have a second type of tolada. Next paragraph, where again another example is techina. Techina is grinding, taking an object and breaking it into many particles. So grinding itself would make it into a fine powder. Cutting a vegetable in very fine pieces is the similar activity, and therefore it is a tolada of techina. It is an offspring. It is also a Torah prohibition. Another example is lisha, which is making a dough, which is it's called kneading. So taking combining tiny particles of flour and making it into a dough. So the same would be with other forms of fine, mixing sand and water to form mud would go into the same category. So all of these are Torah prohibitions, and there's just other forms. Yes.
So for in terms of like cutting vegetables or whatever on Shabbos, like what's defined as like a fine piece? Just because I've heard different
things. Okay, when we come to this actual category, we'll go into detail. Generally, if it's made a little bigger than the Israeli salad, that would be bigger. Now we come to the Rabbinic Prohibitions at the bottom of the page. Now, again, we had learned last week that the Rabbanan make a safeguard. They make a fence in order for one not to transgress the Torah prohibition. So again, we're going to now look at different situations that might be similar to or lead up to a Torah prohibition. So the first type, next page, is something that resembles, and people might come to do the malacha itself. If you could do activity A, you might think that activity B is also permissible, where B is a Torah prohibition. And the example that's given here is disha, threshing or squeezing juice. So Torah prohibition is only on two items. Squeezing grapes, and as a result from the grapes, in addition to grape juice, we also get wine. Squeezing olives, in addition to getting olive juice, we also get olive oil. Only these two fruits, squeezing them on Shabbos is a Torah prohibition. Now, what about orange juice? Orange juice is just another form of the orange itself. It's called pureed orange. So therefore, it's not really changing its form. From grape to wine, that's its own identity. From olive to olive oil is its own identity. That is a Torah prohibition. All other juices of fruits and vegetables is, from a Torah perspective, not a malacha. However, to us, we seem to put them both in the same category. If one were to squeeze orange juice and say that's permissible, then why not grape juice when you're going to be squeezing the grapes for grape juice? So to a person, they sort of would blend in together. We would think the fact that we're squeezing fresh oranges on Shabbos morning, then one might come to take a fresh grape and make grape juice, and they will equate it the same, even though grape juice, Torah prohibition, orange juice would be permissible. So the Rabbanan made a fence, not to do anything that's going to be confusing, and therefore all fruits and vegetables that are squeezed for their juice or being used in a form of a juice is forbidden on Shabbos. All of this has to be done beforehand. There is there is something that is permissible, this for using it as a part of a food, where it's not as a drinking juice, but rather a food enhancer. So here we have squeezing lemons. That's the the one that's always used as an example. Squeezing lemons into a lemon salad has to be done directly, because now it is from the lemon, which is a food, into the salad, which is a food, and it's not being used as a drink liquid. So what you cannot do, it has to be direct. You cannot squeeze it in a cup and then into the salad, because then you created a juice. You cannot squeeze it in a spoon and then put it in the salad, because as it's in the spoon, you created a juice. It has to be directly from the lemon into the salad. The same if you want to enhance, or some people like lemon juice on top of a salmon. So again, you're squeezing from the lemon onto the salmon, because you're now enhancing the salmon. It's being used as a part of a food rather than a liquid. So we do have these two, this difference. So these would be some of the rabbinic prohibitions where it is similar, the permitted activity is similar to the prohibited activity, and they were concerned that if one were to do the permitted activity, it might then transfer to the prohibited activity. Then we have Maris Ayin at the bottom of the page. Maris Ayin is what the eye observes. And then not to do an activity that looks like you had done a Torah prohibition. And let's turn the page. The example that we gave is the example we gave last week is hanging out clothes to dry. And it looks like it was washed. That's why it's washed on Shabbos. That's what some people might come to a conclusion. And therefore, they made a prohibition of hanging out wet clothes to dry because of Maris Ayin, because of what the eye sees. And so one of two things: either you say that since this person is doing it, it must be permissible, or you say that that person is transgressing Shabbos. So one of the two when you see someone doing so. So what do you do when you come in from a rain and your jacket is drenched? So what do you do with it?
It's raining. You don't put that outside.
So now you're inside, and you now. What would you do in the weekday?
Don't hang it outside, because then people will.
Okay, so what would you do in the weekday when you come in with a wet a wet jacket.
Hang it outside.
That's what you would do. Okay, so Shabbos, you would hang it the same way as you would a dry jacket. Whatever you would do to a dry jacket, then you could do that to the wet jacket. What you could not do is you cannot spread it out on two chairs, where that's obviously you're trying to dry it. Or those who have indoor dryers, the ones that the racks that so you cannot put it on that rack because that's specifically used for drying. But you could put it in the back of a chair. A person does that in the weekday. You could do that. You could hang it up put it on a hanger. You could put it on a doorknob. You could do things that one would assume that even to a dry garment, you would put it in the same place. You're not putting it out to dry. It's not specifically, doesn't look like a dry. But then again, this would only apply to something that's made of an absorbent fiber. If it's a plastic, then these rules do not apply because it doesn't absorb to begin with. So doesn't go into the category of the prohibition of washing, as we're going to go into detail as we do the washing melacha. Then we have activities that could lead to a transgressing a Torah prohibition, and that would be doing business. The example that's doing here is it's prohibited to do business on Shabbos. So that would have two reasons why. Firstly, it is not in the Shabbat spirit. It is a weekday activity. So that itself would be a reason why one cannot do business. But in addition to that, a part of business is writing, whether it's writing a contract, writing up an invoice, or whether it's writing what you're buying. So all of these, since these writing a check, all of these are part of business, and therefore writing is a malacha, and anything that leads to writing is prohibited on Shabbos. So therefore, there are two reasons why one cannot do business on Shabbos. Firstly is writing. Secondly, because it's not the Shabbos spirit. Another example would be muktzah, handling items that normally would lead to a malacha, handling a pen. So when you're handling a pen, that leads to writing. If you're going to be doodling, making pictures, or whatever it may be. Yes, your question.
I'm wondering, like, with the doing, like for example, like not hanging out laundry because other people might see something. Like, first of all, like, it's like, why do we care what other people?
Okay, we had that last week in the Torah source, where we had the people of Gad and Reuven were doing something that might be suspicious, and the Torah tells us that let me just mention it again. The Jewish people ready to go into Eretz Yisrael on the other side of the Jordan. The people of Gad and Reuven said they want to settle on this side of the Jordan. They don't want to go they don't want to cross the Jordan. And the Moshe Rabbeinu tells them the people are going to think that you are afraid to go into Eretz Yisrael, and that's going to bring a fright on all the Jewish people. So they say that we're going to build cities for our wives and children and our livestock. We're going to arm ourselves. We're going to be the vanguard of the army that's going to be going into Eretz Yisrael to show that we're not afraid to go in. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you'll do so, then you will be innocent in the eyes of God and of Israel. So the Torah tells us that it's something to be concerned. So either it is other people are going to follow your lead, what you're doing, and they're going to misinterpret it, or they will say that there's something that you are doing wrong. An example of Marasayim would be when the different milk type beverages were introduced, but they were dairy free. At one time, this was something that was new. So then the ruling was that if you're going to be serving it at a meat meal, it has to be served from the container itself. So you will know that it is an almond milk, it's a soy milk, whatever else it may be, rice milk, whatever it is. But what happens if you would be serving in the container that you would add without knowing what type of beverage it is? You would assume that it's milk. So then, after a meat meal, you're serving coffee with the non-dairy creamer, but it is actually, some people would assume that it's dairy because non-dairy creamers were not yet popular. So that was a concern. What was the concern? Both things. People might see that you're coming to a religious activity and you're being served coffee and milk after a meat meal. That means that you can't have it together, but maybe immediately after. You don't have to wait a certain time. You can have coffee and milk right after. So people would come to wrong conclusions. And so Malas Ayin is a concern that the Torah takes into consideration.
I don't get why those people wouldn't just like ask for like, because I feel like.
Because you won't ask, because it's not even a question to you. It's not even something that you are going to, if you're not familiar with it to begin with. If you're not familiar with to begin with that, the laws of kashrus, it would not be a question to you. You would assume that that's what's done. Let's say someone is just getting introduced into kashrus, to kosher. You don't know all the details of it.
You have to walk with like eyes on the back of your head and do everything on Shabbos with eyes on the back of your head, which like isn't relaxing.
Oh, no, but most things that we do are not suspicious. It's only certain things like hanging out clothes. I don't think there's other things that you really are concerned about so much that you're doing something that doesn't look kosher.
So it's more suspicious to people who aren't keeping Shabbos, not people who know, oh, this person's hanging Shabbos clothes out on clothes rack, like they're just.
But we also have the same thing would also be with children growing up. You have in a family have children growing up. They know that they put out the things to dry. Children not always are able to discern. It came in from the rain. It came in from it came from the wash machine. So even when we're speaking about what's being observed, does not necessarily have to be from outside the household. It could be from the household itself that children are growing up, and they're seeing there's a certain way of life that's in the house that's accepted, not knowing to discern yet, or at a later time they might learn about it. But as they were growing up, this was something that was natural. So we know that the clothes are hung out on the clothesline after you wash it, after it's done the wash. So then they see that the clothes are being hung on the clothesline. You think to yourself, you're allowed to do that on Shabbos. Same thing is, the same. So this is something that it would be a concern, and so we take that into consideration. Then there is the activities that lead up to a malacha. That would be climbing a tree. It could lead to cutting off something from the tree that's growing, which is Torah prohibition, Ktziram. Then we have muktzah, those items that would lead up to a malacha. So handling that on Shabbos is a concern. So therefore, handling a pen on Shabbos would be a concern because it might lead to writing. The same thing as handling a hammer used for building. So these items are not handled on Shabbos. Then we have the last paragraph on activities that can lead to transgressing Torah prohibitions. Some of this also applies to before Shabbos as well. A food that's not fully cooked and it is edible for the evening. So there's a concern that one might increase the fire to hasten the cooking. So there are certain circumstances when you could put things on the blech or on the crock pot. So there is a certain state of the food when you set it up for Shabbos. Now the last activity is the Rabbinic Prohibition for sanctity of Shabbos. And that would include checking one's business affairs to determine what has to be done after Shabbos. This is also prohibitions of doing unnecessary toil on Shabbos. And that would be preparing on Shabbos for something that is needed after Shabbos. So that would include washing the dishes. So which dishes could you wash on Shabbos?
Ones you're going to use again on Shabbos.
Ones that you are anticipating that you might be using on Shabbos, so then you're doing it for Shabbos. Things that you know that you will not be using on Shabbos, then you put that away and you'll wash them after Shabbos.
Are you also allowed to wash dishes if it causes you like a lot of distress that they're dirty?
Oh, if it causes you distress, put them away in a cupboard so you won't see them. Or if it is in the summertime where you're concerned that it might become, give off an odor, you could put it in a basin of water, so it will not, attract flies and things of that sort. But you're doing it because of Shabbos itself. Same would also be with when it comes to the end of the day, the end of Shabbos afternoon, can you clean up? And the answer is, if it bothers you, then you're doing it for Shabbos, then you are permitted to. So if that's in a Shabbos activity, then it is permissible. In Shulchan Aruch, it speaks about making the bed on Shabbos. At that time, I guess the people did not. The only time they made the bed was when they're preparing it to go to sleep. So again, if it bothers you, you want to have a bed that should be neat for Shabbos, then it's a Shabbos activity. There's no issue with that, making a bed on Shabbos. Even though in Shulchan Aruch it says that if you're preparing it for the night, don't do it. But nowadays we're speaking about what room to be neat, so then it's fine. So anything that is disturbing your Shabbos, menuchas hanefesh, to be comfortable on Shabbos. The same would also be, let's take another example. You have peeling eggs, shells. Shells themselves are, what could you do with them? They technically would be muktzah. So it's advised when you're going to peel shells, when you're going to be peeling the eggs, you should peel it over the wastebasket so you don't have an issue. What happens if a person did peel it on their countertop? If it doesn't bother you, it's muktzah, leave it. But if it bothers you, then you're allowed to, shove it into the wastebasket. But so again, that's taken into consideration in halacha. So
about this walking, yeah,
walking, it matters where you're walking to. If you're walking to shul or you're walking to a Shabbos shir, then you walk as fast as you wish because you're doing it for a mitzvah. Other than that, it is one acts as a princess and a queen on Shabbos, and therefore you do on Shabbos things that are dignified. So people normally were not running around at a time of as a dignified manner. So on Shabbos you act dignified. If it is something that is needed, then you go according to the circumstances. So to go to shul, go to a shir, then you walk briskly. Other than that, Shabbos is a relaxing time. You stroll, you don't run. Okay. So we have here an essay on Shabbos. I think it would be helpful to understand what is the thought behind these 39 malachos. Now we come to the last page where we have vocabulary. Before we're going to be starting to learn about the 39 categories, I would like to know, where at what level this class basically is. Are most people familiar with the laws of Shabbos?
What does familiar mean?
Familiar means that you know the general rules, but not the very detailed rules. So everyone is familiar with the general rules of Shabbos. So when I'm teaching, I'm assuming that you know the category, and then just to go into details, so we'll be able to, that's what this class is for. Okay, let's we'll start with the terms. Number one, this is on the back page of this booklet. Malacha is a creative, productive work that is forbidden on Shabbos and Yontif, which differs from labor, which is avoda, which is, we would consider exerting effort. So it's not the effort that is forbidden, but rather the creative, productive work. That is why carrying something in your pocket from taking it from private domain to public domain or carrying in public domain itself is considered a creative productive work. Same thing as opening up a light, making a fire, striking a match. It's not a labor. It's not really exerting yourself, but it is a forbidden activity. So if someone wants to pick up this table, which is exerting a lot of energy trying to pick it up, so carrying this on Shabbos from this room to the next room, even though you're exerting a lot of energy and effort, it is permissible on Shabbos. It is not a malacha. It is labor, but it's not a malacha. So the prohibition is not the exertion, but rather doing the malacha, which is a productive, creative work. And also has to be melechas machshavas, something that's an act of craftsmanship that was done during the construction of the Mishkan. And it's something that is done deliberately, something that you are intentionally doing. So what happens if someone leans against the wall and there is a light switch there? And as you're leaning against the wall, the light switch goes on. So is one liable for that? You have to do tshuva for that. And it's an accident. It's something that's unintentional completely. It's not the same as walking into the room, forgetting that it's Shabbos and switching on the lights. That is something that you deliberately did do, but you forgot it was Shabbos. So that is called a shogeg. That is something that one has to do tshuva for. But leaning against the wall and having the light switch, that is not liable at all. It's called an ones, something that was without any intention whatsoever. Then we have number 4, Malacha D'Oraisa, Torah prohibition, that we speak about. Those are the 39 categories and all the derivatives of it, and all of them told us, all of the offspring. And then we have Malacha D'Rabbanan, a rabbinic activity that is forbidden. And we've gone through the rabbinic authorities where the Torah gives them the authority, so therefore we're obligated to follow those rules. The most of these rules that were with Shabbos defenses were done by Anshe Knesset Agdola, the men of the Great Assembly. So it's been with the Jewish people from the time of the building of the second Beis Hamikdash. So Ezra and his Sanhedrin, part of the Sanhedrin were Daniel, Mordechai, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, who were the prophets. So we have the 140 members of the Anshe Knesset Agdola, the men of the Great Assembly. You have Shimon HaTzadik, who was the last of the members of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. So they're the ones who set in many of the rabbinic ordinances that we follow today. That would include the form of our davening, the form of our brachas, the actual language that we do. They all come from Anshe Knesset Agdola. There were additional interesting enactments that they made, and one was that those who sell perfumes and jewelry cannot only sell in large cities. They also have to make it available to towns and villages that normally the salesman would not go to those places, but the rabbinic ordinance is that if they are a jewelry and perfume salesman, they have to also make available the wares to people who live in little towns and villages as well. So this was something that they had in mind to enhance the life, to make, you wouldn't think that this was something that they would be concerned about, to make sure that the women have perfume and jewelry for Shabbos and Yontif, but this was a concern also as well. It wasn't only, the brachas that we make. They also made an enactment that those who were baking bread at that time, they did not go to the bakery. It was all done at home. So anyone who's going to bake bread, they should do so in the morning. In order that if someone is coming by, the people were, the people did not go to a restaurant, they would be traveling. So in case someone knocks on your door and says, "Could I have a little food?" And you say, "Wait, I have to first make the bread." Was the main part of food, and that was bread was the meal. So they would say, wait, I have to first make the dough, I have to wait for it to rise, I have to bake it, come back in 3 hours. Meanwhile, the person is starving. So they made an enactment that if you're baking bread, bake it early in the morning, so it'll be available if anyone comes by. So I'm just trying to give you sort of a picture that they were not only, also do the laundry, don't leave it for Friday, do it before Friday, so that when it comes Friday, you'll be free to be able to prepare for Shabbos without having to do the laundry. So I'm just giving you some examples of what the Anshe Knesset Agdala enacted, not only the restrictions on Shabbos, our form of davening, brachas. This is something that all over in life they're trying to enhance the Jewish life.
Thank you.
Okay, your name is, I don't know, again, next to a real diamond, your name is?
Sarah.
Sarah?
Abigail.
Abigail, let me see, do I have you? Sarah Abigail Milligan. What's Jin? Again, okay. Sarah Abigail, yes. If anyone would like the handout that I had given out the last 2 weeks, I still have available. The overview of the 39 malachas. I have this one, and then the one for rabbinic authority. Okay, so